In this video, we'll learn how to model a 6-point frame, first with a single mesh, and then with 2 meshes. We'll start with this blue 3D polyline frame that I created earlier in Rhino. The vertices of the 3D poly will define the fixed points of the mesh. That means that we have 6 fixed points. First, let's model this with a single mesh. On the In-Panel Model Builder drop-down menu, we'll select Draw Corner Mesh. Then we'll select the 4 corners in order, starting with the bottom left corner, going to the bottom right corner, skipping the middle corner, going to the top right corner, and top left corner. Now we have our mesh. The next thing we'll do is turn on the mesh nodes in Rhino. We do that by clicking the Rhino Points On tool, selecting the mesh, and clicking Enter. Now we can see the nodes, and what we're going to do is grab a node near the middle of the mesh and snap it to that middle point that we skipped earlier when we were making the mesh. When we do this, we also want to make sure that Rhino O-Snap is on so that we know that we're snapping exactly to that point. Let's do the same thing on the other side. What we've done here is pull the edges of the mesh out and attach them to these 2 corners. Now what we're going to do is form-find the correct shape for the mesh. First, we'll turn off the mesh nodes. We can do that by hitting the Escape key. And then we'll select the 3D polyline frame and the mesh and run the Relax Cable Edge Meshes tool. This will add cables to all the mesh edges and determine the natural force balance shape for the mesh. So there's our new relaxed mesh. But sometimes you'll want to model a frame with more than one mesh, because that gives you more control over the model and allows you to adjust the meshes individually. In order to do that, let's first make a copy of our original polyline frame. Let's put it right over here. We can get enough space. And now let's just revert back to top view so we can see exactly what we're working with here. And let's move in on this new polyline frame. And what we're going to do is put 2 meshes on it. So in order to do that, we'll go back to the model builder. We'll click on Draw Corner Mesh. And then instead of the 4 corners that we selected last time, we're going to start with the bottom left corner, bottom right corner, and we're going to go up to the corner that we skipped in the middle on the right here, and then across to the other corner that we skipped in the middle. And those are our 2 top corners. So there we have a mesh. Now we've meshed the bottom half of our frame. But before we mesh the top half, let's change the color of this mesh to something else so that we can tell the meshes apart when we do the next mesh. Let's select this. And under Properties here, we can change this display color. Let's try red. So now we have a red mesh. Now we're going to do the same thing to the top half of the frame. So we'll go back to the model builder, click Draw Corner Mesh, and this time we'll select the left middle corner as our bottom point. Go across to the right, top, top, and now we have a mesh for the top half of our frame. So let's take a look at what we have now. Have these 2 meshes here, making a kind of tint. So what we're going to do is relax these meshes with the Relax Joined Edge Meshes tool. When we use this tool, In-Panel will interpret any meshes which are joined at their corners as part of a continuous mesh. So there is a smooth ridge to this model, just as if it were a single mesh. So let's select the meshes and the polyline frame and run the Relax Joined Edge Meshes tool, which is found right here. Now In-Panel colors the newly relaxed meshes the same, they're both black, so I'm going to select this bottom mesh and change it back to red so we can tell it apart from the top one. There we go. Notice that the curvature of this joined edge mesh is actually exactly the same as the curvature of the single mesh that we created earlier, right here. We have the same surface, but it's made of 1 mesh on this model and 2 meshes on this model. Another thing we could do is relax the double mesh model with the Cable Edge Mesh Relax tool. In that case, Mpanel would put a cable on each mesh edge, including the internal edge, which will give us a sharp ridge line where the cable runs. Sometimes that's what we want. So let's make a copy of this and try that. What we'll do is, let's first straighten this out a little bit, zoom in, and then select the 3D polyline frame and the mesh, and run the Cable Edge Meshes Relax tool. If we delete our old mesh and take a look at this, we can see that we now have a fairly sharp ridge along the top, where the mesh used to be smooth, and that's because Mpanel has added a cable there. We're now finished with our exercise, and we've learned how to model a 6-point frame with a single mesh, a double mesh, and a cable edge mesh.